Hello, my name is Nathan Mulford. Thank you for joining me today for my artist talk about my exhibition at Finch Lane Gallery entitled Tributaries. I'd like to thank the Salt Lake City Arts Council for the opportunity to exhibit my work at Finch Lane Gallery. And I also wanted to give a special thanks to Claire Taylor and Samantha Smith for the opportunity to give this artist talk. I'd like to begin by giving you some background about myself. I'm a native of Utah. I've lived in the Salt Lake Valley for most of my life. My family has lived in Utah for generations, and my ancestors were pioneers, ranchers, and miners. I think that my Utah heritage is an important part of my work. Growing up here, I developed a real love of history and for the outdoors. I love spending time in Utah's national parks. I also am fascinated with the Great Salt Lake, and a lot of my previous art has been centered around that. Many of the themes that I like to explore are centered around Utah's geology and history. Growing up, I always really loved art. I was one of those kinds of kids who was always drawing something. When I was in junior high and high school, I took every art class that they would let me take. And I always knew that I was going to have a job in the art field. When I was young, I thought that I was going to be an illustrator, but then as I grew older, I decided what I wanted to do was pursue a career in graphic design. I started my art education at Utah Valley University, and then I transferred to the University of Utah, where I studied graphic design and earned a BFA in 2010. While I was studying at the University of Utah, I gained a real appreciation for painting and for abstract art. And when I graduated, I decided that what I wanted to do was pursue a career as a fine artist. I became really interested in the idea of exploring how we form our personal histories early on in my work. My paintings are inspired by the role memory plays in shaping how we think about ourselves and how we represent ourselves to other people. Each of my paintings develop their own history that I build up with paint and graphite and other materials. I see a lot of parallels in how our environment is shaped by natural processes and how we as humans shape our identity. The concept for Tributaries grew out of the idea that how we see ourselves comes from different places in our lives. I had been studying images of rivers and river systems for a while. And the idea that a river is constantly shifting its banks and transforming itself appealed to me. I was interested in how things that we build, like roads and farms, interact with our changing environment. I think now would be a good time to talk about some specific paintings that are in the show. This painting is called Signal Peak. One of the things that I love to do in my work is create interesting textures. When I'm creating texture, I'm trying to use paint in the same way I see texture created in nature, or I'm trying to replicate natural processes in my paintings. For instance, I like to try to replicate erosion in my work, and I do that by applying paint to the surface of the canvas and then pouring water over the paint to wash it away. I also do a lot of sanding in my work to wear away the painted surface. Another thing I like to do is to pour fluid paint onto the surface and let that paint dry. I like the idea of surrendering myself to the whims of the paint. When I am using paint like this, I can't really control where it goes or how it reacts to the other parts of the painting. I think this helps me to create a dialogue with the painting. Another important element in my process is the excavation of layers of paint. I like to build up the canvas surface with lots of layers of paint and then excavate those layers to reveal what's underneath. I'll go back and forth like this for a while, adding layers of paint and stripping away layers again. For me, this is analogous to the stratification of the Earth's crust. This painting is titled Mount Eleanor. Like a lot of my paintings, I began this piece by just getting some color on the surface. I also like to scribble and make wild gestural lines that I know I'm going to cover up later. Then I like to divide the canvas up into horizontal and vertical bands. One of my favorite tools to use in trying to get inspiration for paintings is Google Earth. I like to take screenshots of interesting aerial views of landscapes, and I use those as reference for my work. A lot of what I reference in my paintings are large man-made structures that you can't see from the ground. Recently, I've been using a lot of circles in my paintings, and that was inspired by looking at images of farms and satellite imagery. This painting is called White Sands. I began this painting after I'd watched a video about the new NASA space plane that's being developed. I learned that NASA has a facility in New Mexico where they have landed lots of space shuttles. It's a landing strip in the middle of the desert north of White Sands National Monument. When I started to look at it through the satellite imagery, I became fascinated with how it looked like the environment was overtaking the facility. I was really drawn to the visual language of landing strips and airports after that, so I decided to try to include some of that language into this painting. This painting actually began as a sister painting to White Sands. It's titled Barrel. I was exploring how we divide up the landscape into geometrical shapes. The painting evolved into being about metals, mining, and how water and metallic elements react in the landscape. This last painting is titled Old Iron Town. The inspiration for this painting came from a ghost town just outside of Cedar City, Utah. I like playing with the idea of using inorganic colors to create organic shapes and textures. This painting also features a fairly rigid grid structure. I like to create grids and lines to contrast with the organic shapes that the paint creates. For me, this painting reflects the tension that I like exploring in my work. The idea that we are all trying to make sense of our lives, that we're trying to find meaning in our experiences. Thanks for joining me today. If you have any questions about any of the paintings in this show, you can reach me at my website, nathanmulford.com, or you can search for me on Instagram using Nathan Mulford. If you want to see the show in person, you can make an appointment at saltlakearts.org/current exhibitions. While you're there, you can read my artist statement about the show and also take a virtual tour of the show by scrolling down to the bottom of the page. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.